Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for my final thoughts on the Smithsonian and Avalon Hills joint projects. Midway, crumbs, that was a bit of a noise, and Guadalcanal. They're clearly trying to escape from that one. Yes, just to wrap up this series on these two, in my view, very excellent games that walk this fine line between somehow being both sort of entry level to grognard type war games, while also having enough detail to please the hardcore war gamer out there. And the ability for players to sort of pick and choose and set the level they like. I really enjoyed doing that playthrough up to and including the point where Oscar decided he would intervene decisively in the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, which leads me to my one big criticism of this game system. And to be completely fair, this criticism applies to a lot of war games out there, and it is that it is most definitely, as you'll have seen from the previous videos, not cat-proof. The amount of devastation that Oscar wrought within minutes during my last video is just testament to the fact that very little thought went into how to keep felines at bay. Now, some might say that it's the responsibility of the owner to keep the cat under some kind of control, but I will counter that by saying that those of us who own cats, or should I say are owned by cats, will know exactly how impossible it is to keep cats at bay. But to be completely fair, no war game out there is immune from the depredations of our feline friends. So although that is my primary criticism of this game, it is very nearly my only one. So I'll let it go at that. Sorry, Guadalcanal, sorry, Midway. But no, to return to a more serious look at these two, I think they achieve a balance exceptionally well. They're not overcomplicated, but I really admire the amount of research that has gone into carefully modeling every air unit, every ship. I mean, the amount of numbers you get on the counters suggests a much more complicated game. But actually, when you get down to the system, it's very simple. Oppose dice rolls with the correct numbers just being added to the result, and that's it for pretty much everything, certainly for all forms of combat. So I have no quarrel with the system whatsoever. The only thing I would say, and this is absolutely not the fault of the games themselves, is that some perspectives on some of the ships and also on some of the air units will probably have changed with the passage of time. Again, you know, these games were made in the 1990s, and certain things were being re-evaluated at the time. It's not such an issue with Guadalcanal. In fact, I note Richard Frank's excellent book on that subject is actually quoted in the bibliography of the Guadalcanal rulebook. But in the case of Midway, there have been some serious rethinks, particularly as more Japanese material has come to light. Information that reveals certain weaknesses the Japanese aircraft carriers had, which were not very obvious at the time. Some of the air group strengths and capabilities might need to be tweaked. But these are really, really minor criticisms. And to be perfectly honest, I would not change the game because as far as historical knowledge at the time goes, I'd say these games are pretty spot on. And to be fair to the Midway design, you know, the excellent book Shattered Sword was a good couple of, you know, at least a decade and a bit in the future. So, so fair play to them for that. But as I say, the system itself is beautifully crafted. I like the way searching works with the use of these wonderfully functional search boards. It makes the whole process incredibly simple. And I like the size that has been chosen for these, because in a game where you'll either need to be umpired if you've got a third person, or if you don't have that much room, you know, to sit apart from each other, having a compact search board like this is actually really handy, really neat. I mean, my dining table is average size, and if you sit at opposite ends of it, you'll struggle to see each other's search boards, even without a physical barrier between them. I think it's very well thought out, like so much of this game series is. And the size, it's compact, but you still get decently sized hexes. So crowding is not a problem. Again, in my videos, it may have looked like these maps got incredibly busy, but that was because I was using one search board to carry the information for two players worth. So, and I did also, to be fair, choose the busiest battle in certainly in the Guadalcanal series, probably the busiest battle across both the boxes. So no surprise that I had task force counters and scout unit counters and a very large cat absolutely everywhere. But no, the boards fulfill their role very well. I won't wave around the battle board because I'll probably swipe my camera over. But as you saw from the previous videos, the battle board is this wonderfully functional bit of kit that you can use so easily for any kind of surface or aeronaval engagement. I like all the handy information that's printed on it, all the relevant charts and tables on either side. Again, it's I think what really suffuses both these titles is the sheer amount of consideration for the players that's really gone into this design, and the screen, the little cardboard screen with the sequence of play and all these little rules reminders is absolutely fantastic. For someone with a memory like a sieve like mine, it's such a godsend having such a beautifully laid out rules reference. And speaking of the rules, I know I've sung their praises for this before, but again, these battle manuals that you get with each game, they're an absolute joy to use and to read. The only complaint I have, and I touched on this previously, but this is more aging person syndrome than any fault of the game, is the text is rather small. And as a younger man, while I had absolutely no trouble reading it back then, I find I do a bit more squinting these days. But it is what it is. And you know what? I would happily accept the small text for all of this beautiful, beautiful detail. I mean, this is one of those rare games, and again, it applies to both of them, where you would get so much enjoyment just from reading the historical narratives and following the literature in the bibliographies, that it's almost worth the price that one would pay for the game just to get these. So yes, well done. Sadly, to the now departed Avalon Hill. For such a brilliantly thought out and brilliantly helpful battle manual. The only thing is, and again this is a size issue, is that I noticed at least one of you had said in the comments, and I find this too, the counter sizes, they are a bit on the tiny side, and I'll just use the Midway set because I didn't get round to punching these out. The ships are not so bad, and neither are the air squadrons, but the scout units and the hit markers, and especially the task force markers. Now I find, have I got this the right way? Oh no, I've got those upside. Oh no, I haven't. I just realised I was trying not to hold these upside down, but they've been printed in opposition to each other, appropriately enough. The task force markers, as you can see in comparison with my fingernail, they are tiny and they are very fiddly. Now, normally this is not a massive problem, but it's just, if you're like me and you suffer from fat finger syndrome, it can be a tiny bit frustrating. Also, in the case of a busy scenario, and really, again, looking at you, Eastern Solomons, rather than any other scenario in this game, you do get a fair bit of bunching up as your task forces move to strategically important areas. That just happens. It's one of those things. But that is really a very, very minor complaint about a small physical detail, which, to be honest, not only kept the game incredibly compact, it probably kept the price reasonable as well. And it certainly is compact. I mean, Midway, as you can see, comes with just the two counter sheets. If my memory is not failing me completely, Guadalcanal, with its larger profusion of ships and aircraft, came with 3 boards worth of counters. So, still a very reasonable number. In terms of the tactical gameplay, sorry, I've sort of meandered from strategic gameplay to tactical, but just to sum up on the other elements of the game's mechanisms, searching, I like how searching works. Searching is handled beautifully in this game. You can do as much or as little as you like, but of course there is the danger that if you do too much searching, if your quest for information is too intense, you might end up betraying your own position. That, I think, is a lovely wrinkle. Yeah, the combat systems are very well thought out. Ratings, that's what I wanted to touch on a bit more. When it comes to surface combat, I love the way that the alpha numeric codes have been used to differentiate between the effects of gunfire and torpedoes versus the effects of aerial bombing or aerial torpedoing. Well, actually, it really is about the gunfire, because of course the way ships damage each other with gunfire is somewhat different, and I like how beautifully this is modeled. So rather than deluging the ships with a series of different armor factors for, resistance to bombs, so horizontal deck armor, resistance to torpedoes, and then resistance to shells, they've kept the numbers just bolted on this ABCD offensive and defensive system that gives you sort of a bit of depth. So a ship with a D-rated gun is not going to be easily punching holes in a ship with A-rated armor. So I like that, because it's enabled them to roll all of these ratings together and still achieve historically plausible results. And I dread to think the amount of thought that must have gone into crafting that side of the design, because again, it's this balance of rolling a huge amount of historical research, comparative, ship data research, and somehow translating it into a system that is really helpful to the player. It doesn't burden you with anything more than the most basic of mathematics, and it's really down to comparing numbers. So the end result is, even with all the optional rules thrown in, if you want an incredibly fast game, you can choose maybe one of the surface battle scenarios, or you can set up the fatal 5 minutes from something like the Battle of Midway, and you can just play the game and you'll probably be done in an hour. The strategic games involving the search boards, I can see you easily doing it in an afternoon and an evening if you focus on nothing else but the game. I think it's the sort of game you could play very quickly, which again feeds into the appeal for players who want something entry level with the extra meat on the bones there as an option, really. So yes, just to sum up, really, I know quite a few of you guys probably have played or even own copies of one or both of these games, so I don't really need to tell you to go and have fun with them. But to anyone who's watching who is maybe considering getting into these games, I would highly recommend you do it, especially if you are interested, if you like games that involve double blind and, a decent tactical system that models Second World War aeronaval combat, then I think you will really like these. They're very quick to learn. If you've never encountered them before, I do recommend playing the basic rules only, because you'll learn those within minutes, and they'll ease you in very gently. The main thing is, letting you focus on bomber operations without worrying about fighters, and then you can introduce fighters later. To me, that's a real winner, because although it seems a bit strange to fight a battle without a combat air patrol, it's great as a way of learning how to nail down the basic rules, and then in your very next game you can go, right, let's do the fighters now. This is good. The other thing is, despite their age, it is possible to find pre-loved copies of these games on eBay. If you're in the States, as I don't get a commission from them, but I recommend Noble Knight, because they're a very, very good store. But there are dealers everywhere who do stock these games. There's a surprising number in the United Kingdom. I mean, I found my copy of Midway on eBay for a very sensible price. So if you'd like to own the game, then now is the time to look for it, because for some reason there still seem to be a lot out there. Long may it be so. If not, it should be fairly easy to find someone who's got a copy. Have a sit down with them, have a play. I think you guys will have an absolute blast. Again, especially if you've got the interest in Second World War aeronaval combat, or indeed the war in the Pacific particularly. Because I find these games really immersive, even when I'm going through the struggle of solitairing them. And that does lead to another observation I'd like to make, which is the artwork. So the colours they employed on the battle boards and the maps, and the rather basic but very effective and very detailed. If I zoom in, all the stuff is there, and the illustrations of the ships and aircraft on the counters. It's very evocative of two things. One, of course, it's that era of war games. It's that era of Avalon Hill, the 1990s. They might not look as pretty as the games manufactured in the 21st century do, but they were pretty awesome for their time, and they looked very, very nice. But there's something about these, particularly the Guadalcanal set and the way that the map has been done, with the very basic colours and the bases marked and the font. There's that business-like sense to it. I find these maps very evocative of the 1940s. Now, if there's any cartographers out there who are pulling their hair out hearing me say that, I'm sorry, it is just me. But I don't know. Feel free to comment, guys. Do you feel the same way about these? Do they sort of give you that 1940s vibe? They certainly do me. And it's the sort of game that's so immersive. It makes me want to put on my my white cap if I'm pretending to be Frank Fletcher, or my black cap if I'm pretending to be Nagumo. And you really get into it. And any game that achieves that for you is well worth having, or at least well worth being in range of for frequent plays. So I will leave those two there. And caveats about cats aside, I will just say, awesome games. Do give them a try if you'd like to. And so it just, by way of finishing, just to thank you guys for following me through yet another series. As always, it's really splendid to have your company. Thank you so much for your interest, and thank you for all the engagement. I really appreciate, even though I'm a bit slow off the mark when it comes to answering, all the comments and all the really awesome observations. And it'd be really fun to keep those. You guys are very good anyway. I don't need to encourage you to keep them going, but thank you anyway. As always, to my really long-suffering veterans, always a pleasure to see you guys, and always a pleasure to hear from you. I hope you've enjoyed this series. As always, I've had so much fun making this, even the bit with the cat. I think the cat enjoyed it too. To anyone who's new to my channel, if the series was rather random, thank you, Oscar. I hope that has only encouraged you to have a look around. If this is the first of my videos you're watching and you're interested in Guadalcanal or Midway, then please do backtrack and watch the earlier videos. If you're here for wargaming in general, welcome. Really nice to see you. Good to have you on board. I hope that you might be tempted to meander around the channel, find some other stuff you find interesting or would like to see. But whoever you are and wherever you're watching from, as always, do take care. Thank you very much again, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video series. Bye.